for joining us tonight. I appreciate it's Bank Holiday Monday and it's been the most beautiful sunny day, so I wouldn't be surprised if you're all sat in your gardens, but if anyone's with us, thank you for joining us. I'm really delighted tonight to introduce Dean and Craig from Signature Finance, who are here to talk to us about funding supported living projects and properties. If you guys want to introduce yourselves to start with and tell us a bit about yourselves.
Yeah, so I'm Dean Birks. I'm from Signature Financial Services. I started Signature Financial Services way back in 2009. A lovely time of to set up a company, certainly in financial services during the recession. Yes, we do at Signature. We do a lot of specialist mortgages. We do the easier stuff, the residential mortgage and what have you. But as we'll go on to talk about, we're a little bit more specialists in certain areas such as social housing and supported living and HMOs and development and everything in between. But yes, I'm a social landlord myself, so I'm a wider portfolio landlord. But yes, so the social, certainly the supported living model is very close to my heart as well, both professionally and personally. And, yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Dean.
Yeah, and I'm Craig Adams. I've been with Signature now since 2017. During that time, certainly for the last two and a half years, I've been doing predominantly buy-to-let stuff, portfolio landlord, the more sort of specialist side of things, bridging finance, refurbishment finance, bridge to let, etc. And sort of 12-18 months ago, we sort of saw the social housing supported living market as quite a big growth area and quite a difficult lending area. So for the sort of for that time, I've kind of been putting a lot of my time and efforts into helping clients to get finance for this type of stuff, which again we'll talk about further on.
That leads really beautifully into it, doesn't it, really? I think when people first start looking at supported living projects, I know that I didn't realise that financing them was any different to a standard buy-to-let. And I wonder if you could just explain why it is different / difficult to get finance for them.
Yeah, I think the main the main difficulty is the type of tenant that it's actually predominantly in these properties, and lenders are or can be. We've done a lot of research over the last however many years, and the same answer that we get every single time, certainly with regards to finances, the vulnerable aspect of the tenants that are in these properties. And obviously that the type of tenants that are in these properties vary such a huge amount. And some that need a very limited amount of care, some that need quite a large amount of care. But that vulnerable element is the most difficult bit to get the banks comfortable. Over the last few years, it's become a lot easier. It's become easier to fund these types of projects. I mean, when I became a supported living social landlord 5 years ago, there was very few lenders in the marketplace. And as we've seen with kind of limited company buy-to-lets, they've become 3 years ago, there was probably a handful of limited company buy-to-let lenders. Now, virtually every buy-to-let lender, bar a few, will do limited company buy-to-lets. So, but yes, the main issue for banks to get comfortable with is the vulnerable tenants and the bad press that they may potentially get if they have to repossess, and that's purely the main contributing factor. Unless Craig, you know of anything else?
No, spot on, summed up really.
I think it's something that I found really frustrating was that definition, because it's very much a definition in their mind of a vulnerable tenant, and you're asked whether the tenants are vulnerable or not, aren't you? And you have to sort of say, and I found that personally, like I said, very frustrating, because I felt it was very much almost in breach of the Disability Discrimination Act. I felt like, actually, why is that young man with learning disabilities more vulnerable than a single mum with 3 children, or who's from that reputational risk? That's what the lenders are concerned about, isn't it? And I'm hoping that as more and more people invest in this model and it becomes easier, it will be something that will be deemed will be an easier hurdle to get over, I guess. But yeah. So that leads on to whether actually there are products out there that people can use. What products are there available, and what can we find?
Yeah, so, I wasn't fibbing. I said I've been working hard on this for the last sort of 12, 18 months. And had you have, rang me 12, 18 months ago, I would have said, well, you're going to have to go with, Together Money or someone like that, and you're going to pay 7%. And you'd put the phone down and I'd never hear from you again. But, we've got quite a few different options now. It's still a niche market, still a very niche market, but in terms of products, and I'll sort of split this up a little bit into now and pre-COVID-19, because I expect, is that okay? So I expect some of these products to return as well. So we were looking at sort of before all the COVID-19 stuff, we could do sort of 75-80% loan to value on some of the smaller stuff, and what I mean by that is, a lot of people do this model for between sort of 3 and 5 tenants on sort of that basis. Or single lets. The commercial side of things has kind of always been there, really, although there is less commercial lenders. But if you go into sort of the big ticket stuff, the larger stuff, then the commercial lending's kind of always been there. And I know we've got plenty to talk about, so I'll try and focus on products. So yeah, still a niche market. So there still isn't lots of lenders doing it, but in terms of lending, you're looking at sort of rates starting at about 3%. Which I know, some people hopefully will be watching now thinking, whoa, that's cheaper than we've ever been quoted. Now, we used to do a lot with a lender that would go up to 80% on these, up to 80% loan to value. That was more like 4% on that basis. They've restricted their lending to 60% loan to value at the moment. So whilst they've still got these nice rates starting from 3%, they are at 60% loan to value.
I think I should probably say, and I meant to say at the beginning of this bit, that we're on with the 25th of May 2020, so we're kind of in the middle of the COVID crisis, and obviously that makes a difference if people are watching this and recorded in the future. So
yeah, of course. Now, I genuinely believe most of these products will come back. What's happened with the market in general is lots of lenders shut the door for a bit. Lots of lenders paused lending, which seems to be quite a common phrase in our industry now. So lots of lenders paused lending. So they've gradually started to come back, lenders have. And it's not sort of like the 2008 recession where that they didn't have any money. It's just more so they're being cautious because no one really knows what's going to happen with valuations and stuff at the moment. So I fully expect us to get you sort of back up to there. And in fact, on the normal lending side of things, there's 3 lenders we tend to use, with rates all sort of varying between 3 and 4%. We generally do them at 75%, the normal sort of golden buy to let. Now, one of them has come back to the market with full 75% as well. So out of these 3 lenders, we've got one at 60%, one at 65%, and one at 75%. Now, we will find you, one of those lenders will fit for your sort of personal circumstances. But yeah, it's definitely got a lot easier. And yeah, I think hopefully that sums it up. If you want to ask me anything specifically.
Do you think the fees are more expensive when you're looking at supported living products, or do you think they're fairly similar? It's just the percentages, the rates are slightly higher.
I think, yeah, fairly similar. And to be fair, the rates are, I mean, you can pull the rates in sort of top 10 lenders now, so it's not like ridiculous now versus personal name buy to let. Then the personal name buy to let is still quite a lot cheaper. But that's the same for limited companies. So your rates for this sort of thing tend to be more sort of where your limited company are, which is great news because everyone does it in limited company. So you're kind of already there anyway. So you're already sort of, and again, anybody listening who's doing limited company buy to lets, 3% won't be a scary number to them. So you're kind of already there. Yes, your personal name buy to lets, for the people that are still doing that, you can get, below 2% on that sort of thing. But obviously, we all know the reasons for doing like limited company, SPV buy-to-lets and stuff like that. So, yeah, no more expensive fee-wise and stuff like that, really. Kind of on a par with limited company buy-to-lets.
And then you talked about some commercial products that are available as well. Are they general commercial products, or would they be specific to supported living?
I'll take it. So you've got both actually. So again, it's not one of them where there's no specific product for. Sorry, to answer your question, for supported living, but the commercial lenders. So it's exactly the same. Some lenders won't like it because of the vulnerable tenant aspect, but some don't really mind, and they just take the value of the lease agreement. So that's never really changed. So it will limit some of your lenders. You couldn't put the deal out to every single lender, and every single lender would come back and say, yeah, it's for us. But it tends to be, as with any commercial deal, sort of, almost they're a bit greedy, aren't they, in the commercial world? It's almost the deal's big enough, they'll take it.
Right.
I know you're doing a bit of extra work on this at the moment as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I think the thing to mention as well, obviously, I think we might touch on it a little bit later, Lisa, but this commercial valuation versus a standard kind of bricks and mortar valuation, obviously the disparity between the two, in terms of the products on the commercial. And I think anybody who's had any dealings with any form of commercial finance will understand that the fees are more expensive, the rates are sometimes more expensive, but where you're going to get the commercial world is a different game. You'll pay for lenders, solicitors, you'll pay for a higher commercial valuation because it's a specialist valuation, and you'll pay for your own solicitors. Usually the fees are typically a percentage of the loan, whereas obviously on your bricks and mortar products, they're usually static valuations, static arrangement fees and things like that, and usually, well, almost certainly a lot cheaper. But it's that, and again, I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit, but there's that disparity between the commercial, whether or not you want to get a commercial valuation and hopefully build your portfolio up in that respect, which many of our clients do. But the trade-off of that is you will have to pay a little bit more, probably, for that benefit. But it's one of those, and everybody's different, and that's why it can be difficult sometimes to be generic. For us, we can be very specific if we know a bit of a specific circumstance of our particular client that we're speaking to.
Do you want to talk a little bit about when people might choose a residential and when they might choose a commercial product? Obviously, it'd be guided by you guys, but the difference between them for people.
Yeah, and I think it's you've got your bricks and mortar valuation, you've got your commercial valuation. This area in between is very grey, and there's a bit of a between the many lenders out there, because you've got your kind of second tier banks, you've got your high street banks, you've got your specialist banks, you've got peer-to-peer lenders now, you've got lots of other trading platforms in terms of being able to borrow money. But in terms of the bricks and mortar valuation, usually it's your smaller stuff. It's your houses that are being used on a multi-room basis, typically up to 3 or 4 rooms, and it kind of follows the HMO model to a degree in terms of the council perception of a HMO model, in terms of if you've got more than 5, then it will probably be more on a commercial scale. But we have got some lenders, and Craig, the products guy, who I like to call him, or Rain Man, one of the two. Very much some lenders will do a commercial valuation on a 4-bedroom property. So there's a little bit of, I mean, we do different ones all the time. We're looking at one at the moment where somebody's got 24 units in a block. Obviously, that's going to be a commercial valuation because they're looking at supported living accommodation for a large provider. But then we've got the other end of the spectrum, whereby it's kind of 3 individuals sharing a property with much lower care needs, and the client is more than happy to just look at a bricks and mortar valuation. And I suppose the key for us is understanding what our clients want to do in terms of what money they need to get out, how much the products are going to cost them, and all those extra bits and pieces as well, really. So I don't know whether that's answered your question or not, Lisa. But
I think so. I think it's that it's quite individualised to each situation. Is what I'm getting from that. That there isn't one. This is the answer to that.
if you think about the sort of the boring maths behind it as well, you know, if you think in terms of if you are going to use the value of a lease agreement, the value of your annual rent, you know, and I know a lot of these sort of property courses and stuff, they'll go, you'll get 10 times gross rent and stuff like that. I've never seen one come back at 10 times, but realistically, you can get sort of between 7 and 9 times, depending on the lender. That could be less than your bricks and mortar value of that same property. Now, I know it's not always, but depending on the property, the bricks and mortar value could be higher than that. And if you're going specialist buy to let, I just talked about being able to potentially do 80% loan to value, whereas on a commercial basis, you're never really going to be doing more than sort of 65, 70 max. So there's a bit of a calculation there on its own, isn't there? You know, if you're going to go 80% at 4% or 65% at that same sort of, well, probably 4.5% to be honest. You know, you could get the same amount with a lower valuation, couldn't you, on specialist buy to let? So it really is sort of bespoke on the project.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. What advice would you give people who are looking to get into or have a project that they want to get funded, particularly, I'm guessing, from early on? But what would your advice be for people?
Lots of people miss the lettings experience side of things, and what I mean by that is if you're doing, they tend to be, these lease agreements tend to have sort of 3 or 4 vulnerable people that are going to be in there at any one time. Now, although it's a fully managed lease and, you know, effectively the landlord's handing the property over for 3 to 5 years or whatever, the lender still looks at this as though it's a HMO. In which case you have to have lettings experience to do an HMO. So if you're doing a normal HMO, if you go straight in at a HMO, there's one lender that will allow you to do that. And unfortunately, they don't also allow supported living. This lender doesn't. So there isn't a lender that will let you go straight in with no lettings experience as your first rental property with this social housing if you're going to have multiple tenants. So that's something to sort of consider, because that gets overlooked a lot.
Wow, yeah, so even if you're not going to be managing that property, it's going to be completely taken over by a care provider, you still have to have that that lettings experience.
Yeah, and believe me, Lisa, I've argued till I'm blue in the face with lenders going, it's ridiculous. It's completely hands-off project. You know, they're not going to be doing anything. But yeah, it just automatically falls into their HMO criteria. Now, we found a bit of a loophole with a lender called Fleet Mortgages, who said their own stance on HMO criteria was if it's 4 or less people, it's not HMO. Now, then there's no other lender that does that.
Right.
That sort of meant we could then put first-time landlords with Fleet on a 4 or less project, but obviously if it's 5 or more, you're back to sort of HMO rules. So obviously you've got to consider that. You've also got to think, you know, again, we get clients who are like, I'm not sure if I'm going to put this sort of tenant in. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. And it's like, yeah, but the lender needs to know the type of tenant you're going to have in. So you need to just sort of stick to your strategy. You know, don't be indecisive. Whichever way you're doing, it's fine. But equally, if you go to me, I might put social housing tenants in. Now, you'd pay a slightly higher rate, as we've already discussed, than you would for not putting them in. So then you're kind of penalising yourself. Now, I guess that's the way to go, I suppose, than the other way around. But, you know, it's pick a plan, pick a strategy. And I know this is quite negative, but you know very well the supported living social housing is a very good strategy as well. Lease agreements, lots of people think that the lease agreements are better, the longer they are, the better they are, which you would naturally think. But again, if you're going to do specialist buy to let rather than commercial, you don't want anything longer than 5 years. That's the maximum on the normal thing. And you always want a break clause within the lease agreement, which it's a break clause for you, so not a break clause for the charity or the housing association, a break clause for you. And if your charities or if whoever you're doing well is not that comfortable, it can be like up to 6 months. It doesn't have to be you're breaking you out for a month. But if you look at it from a lender's perspective, if they take possession of that house, they are you then, aren't they? So they can't, without that break clause, they can't sell the property because they don't want to rent it out on your behalf, do they, if they're repossessing. Anything else, Dean, do you think?
I think the key for us, Lisa, is like with anything really, that finance is extremely important for a lot of people. Not everybody's in a privileged position to be able to cash flow these projects with an unlimited supply of cash. And there are so many restrictions that lenders, whether you're in a commercial realm or a bricks and mortar realm, or a specialist or non-specialist, or not vulnerable or vulnerable tenants, any lender is going to ask for inside leg measurements. And I suppose the key for us, obviously, we want our clients to do well, because if our clients do well, the business does well. And certainly in this particular sector, supported living, there's lots of people that are able to be housed that need them. So for us, it's about knowing early on what your plans are as a client, and just really laying all the cards on the table, and just understanding exactly what it is that you want to do, and ultimately what you want to achieve at the back end of this as well. Because a lot of people, obviously, cash is king, cash is queen, and ultimately it's very much a case of making sure that we've got a process in place and an understanding, so that most people that we work with, certainly in this particular sector, won't just do one project. They'll do multiple projects, because it gives them the satisfaction that they're providing a service to a community. But also as well, it's a very, very good kind of business model from a landlord perspective, because in times like these, when I invest heavily into the student market, and there's lots of questions around whether the students are going to be coming back and whether or not they're going to be fulfilling their contracts. And there's a huge demand for this, and obviously the reason why you do this, Lisa, and you do a great job. And it's kind of almost future-proof. It's foolproof in it to a degree, because of the way in which it's funded, and it's relatively hands-off. But yeah, for us, it's just to know as much as we can as early as we possibly can, because everything else can fall into place, and you can negotiate contracts. And I think one of the key things, and Craig touched on it, is the lease and the detail in the lease. And for us, because we do so much of this at the moment, certainly we've actually got now lenders that will tell us what we should have in leases and what we can get through with underwriters and what we can't. I know Craig had a particular one where we put it under the nose of the underwriter, and the underwriter was honest, I don't like this particular paragraph. And the client went away, spoke to the charity and the care provider, and they took it out. And for that reason, we were able to get them with the lender that we wanted to. So if we hadn't have done that work at the front end, we probably would have struggled, or we would have got them slightly more expensive products. So yeah, it's the same with everything, isn't it? Really, just plan.
Yeah, we always want a lease agreement up front on these, which I know is unusual, but it just makes life so much easier. Just stops any problems, because effectively the lease agreement or any tenancy agreement is not going to be checked until it gets to the lender's legal team. So by then, your client's paid a valuation fee. I mean, our broker fee, we don't charge till completion, but still the valuation fee can be quite hefty. Sometimes there's upfront application fees and stuff like that. So I don't want my clients spending all that money and then it falling down after 8 weeks and going, well, you didn't tell me this, So kind of insist on getting the lease agreement up front, or won't do it, to be honest, because it's just, then, don't you? It just makes it easier.
Yeah, that's really wise, absolutely. So if I had a standard residential property that I'd bought, and I'd bought it on a standard buy-to-let mortgage, and then after I'd finished the refurb, someone approached me and said, here, have a 5-year lease on it. Oh, brilliant, I love this idea. Can I not just sneak that under the radar? I've heard people doing this. I've spoken to people who said to me I was too honest about the properties that I've done. So that's why I'm asking this. Could I not just go, do you know what? Actually, it's fine. I'm not going to declare it. It's not changed. I've got the finance in place. What would the implications be if I did that?
Well, obviously you're breaching your mortgage effect, so there's that. Now, okay, the chances of a lender finding that out are pretty slim whilst everything's going fine. But what happens is you buy another property, you come back to remortgage, you potentially use the same lender. I've seen it done, you know. So the lender then sees a portfolio, or another lender does and goes, well, that's how are you getting, you know, £1,200 a month on that single let, you know, and so at every sort of point, then you're potentially vulnerable to, you know, to notifying that lender. So yes, the reality is, and on a purchase. So on a purchase, I'm saying, you know, I'll get the lease agreement because I will. But the reality is, the lender's legal team won't ask for that lease agreement or AST if you just go and buy it on a mortgage, on a buy-to-let mortgage, and then put this sort of lease agreement in after. But, you know, it depends what you do, really. So you could alert it with future mortgage applications, but almost certainly, if you've got a mortgage, you're going to want to remortgage that same property at some point, aren't you? So when you go back to that same lender, at that point, then you've just basically told them what you've told them you've reached your mortgage, and they're not going to lend to you at that point, then, you know, because they just don't. So it's not a criminal thing. It's not, you know, you're not going to get into loads of trouble, but what you'll get is potentially a marker on your name on sort of the lender's sharing system, which means a few other lenders won't lend to you and stuff like that. And it's just a bad position to be in if you're planning to build a property portfolio with any type of client. You know, you don't want lenders that won't lend to you, do you, ultimately?
No.
And that's it, isn't it? It's about keeping the market as open as you possibly can for you, because when we're all operating in this restricted market anyway, Lisa, that it's so important. It's less so important with your residential property, with your own home, because virtually every lender on the marketplace does that. But when we're in this small pot of lenders anyway, it becomes even more important to make sure that we're doing what we can to keep them happy. And we've had instances in the past, and it might be that it's certainly a signature sometimes with a doom and gloom, guys and girls, because we can say things to clients that they don't necessarily want to hear, and they can make their own choices and what have you, by all means. And there are certainly people out there that will do it in a certain way, which might be fine for the first one. It might be fine for the second one. But at some point, if you imagine, like Craig says, if you're getting you're with a standard buy-to-let lender that only does standard buy-to-lets, and you're getting £1,200 a month for a 3-bedroom semi or a 2-bedroom terraced in sunny Stoke, the lender's going to ask the questions when they're asking for your bank statements to show the rental income. They aren't daft. They really aren't daft, and they will ask the questions. And we've had one before where a client of ours was, she was very did lots of business with us, and for one reason or another wanted to take a slightly different strategy and use a product that we didn't feel as though was actually prudent for the type of use that it was going to be. Went very quiet. A couple of years later, got a phone call from her, and basically said, "Don't tell me you told me so." It was she can't go back to certainly 2 lenders that she was using quite regularly, because they found out what she was doing, and that made it was fine in a sense that we could find another product, but she was having to pay more for it now. And it's kind of that trade-off. And as a business owner as well, I would never put my business, regardless of what type of business it is, if I was serious about it, I would never put it in jeopardy in any way, shape or form, whether that be what I say, what I do, and everything in between. So I just think of it, well, if we're going to do this properly and we're going to do it right, because
that makes sense.
Morally as well, if we're using it, if you imagine the whole reason why the market space is limited is because of the vulnerable tenants kind of ethos from the lenders. If somebody's then using the wrong mortgage contract, there comes a point when actually the lender will force you to refinance that property. If you can't refinance it for whatever reason, guess what happens? The lender has to repossess, and they have to do exactly what they don't want to do, which is get the tenants out.
Absolutely.
And do things properly.
And honestly, now as well, it's not like 2 years ago, like I say, when you were paying a silly rate, and it was sort of worthwhile, perhaps. Well, close your ears, Dean, but perhaps it was worthwhile doing that, being a bit naughty. But now you're probably talking 0.25% more to go on the correct project. sorry, correct product, you know, so it's just not worth it, is it, anymore? It's just do it properly.
I know you've got a case study you were going to share with us. I've noticed there's a few comments being dropped into, questions being dropped into the comments, but if people have got any questions for you guys, if they want to put them into the comments, then we can talk about them in a minute. I think screen share should be working now. See if you can.
Let's have a look.
So Witchcraft, who's done it? He's done it. Impressed.
There we go. Can you see that then? Is that okay?
Perfect.
Lovely. So yeah, this was actually a case study of mine. This was how I came to. I fell into the supported living, becoming a supported living landlord. I was looking at a project. This is the Old Mill project. This was now 5 years ago, because the care provider is now 5 years into this particular lease. Oh no, it's here we go. So that's the project itself. At the time, it was an old. It used to be a former cotton mill, from what I understand, and then the people who I purchased it from were using it as a commercial unit to trade from for their offices. Unfortunately, they had to vacate the premises, and the property came on the market. And I always had it in my mind that I wanted to convert it back into a residential. This is in Stoke-on-Trent, where, if people haven't recognised already, that's where we're from, and our accents, our Stokey accents. But ultimately, I purchased this particular property for a bargain, £105,000, which at the time it was a real bargain. Actually, this was 5 years ago now. The property itself was a very good location. You can literally walk to the main city centre shopping centre in literally like 4 minutes, I think it is. So again, another really good thing for these types of supported living is location, as well as a lease, as well as everything else. But certainly for the care providers, it's location, and if it is close to the local amenities. So the refurbishment of this, so as I say, this was completely ripped back to a shell, literally 4 walls and a roof. I even took out the first floor. We reinstated that, and it cost 226,000 and a few pence. The finance costs on this, so I was able to finance the purchase, and I borrowed all of the money for the refurbishment on a bridge. Now, obviously, we do lots of different strategies for people, and this is why it's good to understand where people are at, what people want to do, and how much money they've got and how much they need to borrow. But for me, actually, I'm a big advocate for bridging. Lots of people may disagree with me because it can be more expensive, but it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's there to provide a facility. This was a refurbishment facility. So mine was £21,560, which was the finance costs. So my total cost for this project was £352,571. Took about 6 months and a couple of weeks through gritted teeth. I managed to secure a contract with a charity. Now, it was a 3-year lease with the charity, because of the way in which a lot of charities are funded. They're funded every 3 years, so that's the maximum that they would. There's no breaks in that, but that's the maximum that they would agree to. So the total contract value for the 3 years was 118,800. Obviously, then we looked at a commercial valuation, and we had it revalued at 500,000, which allowed me on a 70% product to pull out virtually all of my money. So this was a brilliant project, because one of the other things to note with this particular product, because I was past the name and number of somebody who worked for the care providers, who one of the decision makers, very, very early on, just when we were actually purchasing this. I actually did a delayed completion on this one. I did a 3-month delayed completion, so it allowed me to get the planning permission in place without having to pay a penny. Obviously, we exchange contracts. That's one just to protect myself. yeah, we managed to get the planning in that time. But in that time as well, the care provider came along, and they actually wanted at least one wheelchair access unit. And obviously we made a couple of modifications to the planning. The planners were extremely susceptible to that as well, because unfortunately it's the lack of wheelchair access properties. And the words of the care provider is, although we're only committing to a 3-year lease, that we would probably stay here for the rest of time, which as a landlord is absolutely fantastic. And obviously they're great tenants. I don't have any problems. As I say, I get a reasonable return on my money. This is a kind of a medium project that, and this was 5 years ago now, so they're 5 years into this, and they're due to renew. I think it's towards the end of next year.
How many units did you divide it into?
Sorry, yes, it's six studio apartments. So 5 of the studio apartments are by the tenants from the care provider tenants, and then we've got one of the units, the middle unit. I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but the middle unit just there with that protruding window, that's the where the carers are. So there's a carer on site 24/7, 365 days a year. And yeah, again, very, very good. It's a great location. You can see here, it's in a walled courtyard with a huge wall that surrounds the property. But it's very, very secluded, but also very, very close to the town centre. It's yeah, it's a really good project, and really nice for the tenants as well, because it's at the end of a dead end street, and yeah, very, very quiet. So lovely, yeah. And I've got a very good commercial valuation as a result of the covenants within the lease, the strength of the lease. I mean, I'll tell you that this particular charity is a subsidiary of MENCAP. So again, just talking about leases, whether we talk about that later, but there's lots of information. This is why we like to see the lease up front, to make sure we're doing the job right the first time. There's so much information in there, but also as well, there's lots of newcos out there that are offering these long-term leases, but they've only just set up. So those types of people with not a huge kind of financial backing, as it were, versus somebody like MENCAP, who is sitting on a substantial amount of liquidity every month. It holds a lot of weight, that does. So again, there's all these little things: the term, the amount, the type of tenancy, the type of tenants, and that all make a huge difference, really. So yeah, that was a nice one, and
that's a great example. Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to end the screen share? Is that you done with that? Yeah. That's fabulous. I know there's a few questions, so I'm just going to go back through and find some of them. Right, so someone's asking, curious to know about safe houses for the police. Is this a good thing to look at? Is that something you guys have come across before?
I haven't, to be honest, no. But I mean, ultimately, we have done lots of different things. We've done the Serco stuff. We've done the NACO stuff, which is sort of the ex-convicts and things like that, which I guess is completely opposite. But ultimately, you know, it goes back to the lease agreement again. You know, and I know it's an easy one to go back to, but the tenant type, you're effectively sort of subletting your property with these lease agreements. So the tenant type, with the lenders that we use now, the tenant type isn't as important, really. It's more the lease agreement and how that's structured with the sublet. So, like I said before, check there's a break clause. If you're doing if these are smaller ones and you're looking at specialist buy to let, 5 years or less. If it's a commercial one, you can go up and above that. So yeah, again, it's the tenant type's not as sort of bad as it used to be, really. They're all sort of classed as vulnerable tenants, although I suppose that wouldn't be so much. So but you've still got the thing of subletting. So initially, if you imagine what we do, you know, we have the whole of the market to look at in terms of lenders, and then we have like these filters that are in place. So, you know, a client comes and goes, but I want to do this, bangs a filter, and I can't use them, and so on and so forth. So filter number one with this type of thing is the subletting. So you effectively, by signing that lease agreement, let somebody else put put a tenant in that you have no control over. So lenders don't like that very much. So that's sort of first filter, do you know what I mean? Because ultimately that's not me signing a lease agreement with Mr. Smith and knowing exactly who my tenant is. Straight away I'll lose control over that. Hence, the rent-to-rent schemes and things like that aren't very popular. So yes, you've got the subletting, and then you've got, normally in this instance, the vulnerable tenant as well, just to sort of bang another filter in. So sorry, long-winded way of saying I don't think there'll be any issues. I don't think it'll be any different.
No, that's really helpful.
I'd be really interested to understand a bit more about that, and obviously certainly for us, it's it's interesting for us as well, Lisa, because like you say, there's so many different tenant types that there will be a lender out there, we can guarantee it, and if we can't find it, nobody can.
Someone's asked, is it then the charity or council, the tenant, as opposed to the vulnerable person? I think,
asked it. Do you want to take it? Do you know me? I'm going to say we get asked it a million times, of course, yeah. But it doesn't matter really from a publicity point of view. If you imagine the headline in the paper, HSBC kicks out vulnerable tenant. So yeah, you're the landlord as well. So they're not even kicking out the tenant; they're kicking you out for not paying your rent on a bulletproof lease agreement that's more secure. But we can talk about it all night. Really, you've got the best lease agreement ever with no rental voids, so less chance of defaulting anyway and getting kicked out. But ultimately, yeah, from a sort of publicity thing, it's that headline, that grabbing headline that the lender kicks out a vulnerable tenant. So
that's what it comes down to.
How
do lenders see lease lengths or break clauses and index is the question.
Index, definitely, and I think
she's then asked us another question about linked rents, pros and cons, longer leases. So I think it's that sort of all combined subject, really.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think Craig touched on it earlier on. The lease is, I would say, me personally, 5-year leases, or Craig might disagree with me here, but 5-year leases or a little bit more are where you're going to get a better a better lender, shall we say, or a better product. As fantastic as my project is on the old mill, and the tenants are absolutely fantastic, and the care providers even better, because they'll only commit to a 3-year contract. For a lot of commercial banks, that's not long enough in terms of for their security. Most of the banks are. So unfortunately, because of unfortunately for me, from a profit margin perspective, I have a smaller pool of lenders, and most of those lenders charge a higher rate of interest. But I'm not going to change that. I could get somebody else in, but for me, it's more about I'm providing a service to those people, and if it costs me a few pounds more, it costs me a few pounds more. It's as simple as that. But yeah, in terms of indexing, I think Russ, when Russ spoke a couple of weeks ago, brilliant, fantastic, because it's very good, very, very good. Certainly your costs will go up to some degree, whether that be a buildings insurance, whether that be maintenance costs, but you don't really have too much of them anyway. But another one to think about as well is, in my lease, in my commercial lease, I actually have a clause where the tenant pays for the cost of the buildings insurance as well, and so I can reclaim that back in one of the clauses in my lease, and it's typically about £1,000 on that particular project. On that particular one, it's about £1,100, about £1,000 a year. So yeah.
So, and about break clauses, I know you've touched on it a little bit earlier. What is there any specific guidance?
So, not really, apart from it must have one. It generally must have one. You'll find it very difficult to finance if it doesn't. So yeah, if some description you want a breakout, and to be honest, if you were, if it was me, I'd want that breakout clause anyway, because if you got into a position where it depends of course on the tenant you're putting in, but where the neighbours want those tenants evicted and it's giving you all sorts of problems, and you get complaints, and the particular charity or whatever go, no, well, we're not moving them out. You almost want that you almost want that little bit of power to go, enough's enough, this isn't working, it's giving me an headache, don't you? So I'd want to break clause if it was me, but from a lending perspective, yeah, you'll find it very difficult, even on a commercial aspect, without some form of break clause. And that's kind of the same with the commercial mortgages as well, isn't it, dealing with any sort of commercial building, really?
Yeah, because it's all down to, obviously, if you speak to, we aren't RICS registered surveyors. We have lots of experience over the number of years, and these surveyors train for sometimes 5 years to do these types of valuations. And obviously, one of the main question we get is obviously, what's the valuation of the property going to be worth? Now, obviously, we can give an indication through experience, but you'll find as well these valuers are humans at the end of the day, and if they wake up one morning and they've had a fallout with a partner and they're not in a very good mood, they might just put a number down that they might not particularly. I know that sounds really, really ridiculous.
And valuers are really, really nice. If there's any valuers listening, I love valuers.
I wasn't saying they weren't nice, Craig. I wasn't saying they weren't nice.
I love you all, valuers. Love you all.
But yeah, it's one of those, and ultimately it's the golden question, shall we say? And that's why we try to do as much work as we possibly can, but we can't do everybody's job.
Of course not.
Yeah, and just to finish off on leases, so specialist buy-to-let. So if it's your smaller stuff and you're looking at that side of things, 5 years or less. On the commercial side of stuff, confusingly, 5 years or more, really. So, I mean, anything in between we can work. You get a lot of 3-year lease agreements, which is fine. Like I say, Dean's is a 3-year lease, but on a commercial basis, which is why that's not quite as appealing, if that makes sense. So 5 years or less, specialist buy-to-let, the longer the better on the commercial stuff, really.
I mean, to give an actual example, Lisa, if it's any good, I mean, I don't mind saying this, but my particular project there, the Old Mill, I pay 6% annually on that with my lender, which is on the high side. I know if I'd have got a 5-year lease, I've just done a very, very similar project, a little bit larger than that, and we've just got them 2.9% annually. So it's less than half in terms of the interest, and they've got a 7-year lease. So yeah, but it's a slightly lower loan to value as well, because so there's lots of caveats that go in there. Obviously, lending, it's all risk based. The lower the risk for the bank, the better offering they can be comfortable with, and the better rate that they can give you. So this was 65% loan to value, borrowing a substantial amount of money, about 700,000, and we got to 2.9% because we're working with a lot of social banks as well, who specialise in this particular market, care homes, supported living, all of those things. They don't actually lend in any other space, and those banks and those lending providers are key, because not only there's a social element to what we as professionals do for our clients, and certainly me as a supported living and social housing landlord, there's a social element to what we're doing here. And these social banks, who have a social kind of ethos, it fits very, very well, and they understand it completely, and actually they're very, very quick. So yeah, it's and they weren't in the market when I started to become a supported living landlord. They're relatively new, but then they understand the whole project and the whole ethos of it.
Is it, so another question, do you guys organise development finance, or is it just exit finance?
No, we do.
If it's a property, we can finance it.
We might hold you to that one.
I mean, my speciality is development finance. That's ground up, that's new build, and commercial finance. Craig, as you've probably guessed now, he's very much in this specialist buy-to-let market, limited company buy-to-let, portfolio landlords, supported living, HMOs, and obviously we both do quite a bit of bridging as well. But yeah, development finance is better for us, because we can get to come in at the front end and understand. We will set up development finance with the exit in mind, and that's why it's important, because and most people who have done this quite regularly, that if you haven't got the right level of exit set up, then sometimes it can be very, very difficult to refinance away from the slightly more expensive development finance, and that's what we want to avoid. Although what we're talking about here, a lot of these things are non-regulated, so they're not regulated by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. We're an FCA regulated firm, but we're also governed by the NACFB as well, the National Association of Commercial Finance Brokers. So for us, we go into non-regulated the non-regulated projects with a regulated mentality of, we will set up a development finance only if we are as confident as we can do that we can get you an exit. Because the worst case that you can do is take out development finance, which is more expensive, believe me, but if you can't get an exit, what's the route to get off that development finance? You've got no route other than to sell the property, in which we don't want. We don't want that. You will probably already have a contract in place with the care provider, so you'd be letting a lot of people down as well as yourselves. So yes, for us, it's a great time because we can do that development finance with an exit in mind.
Perfect. That's brilliant. You just answered this next question as well, so there you go. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. How do people find you if people have got more questions, if they want to get in contact with you about things? What's the best way for them to go about that?
I've got, if this is okay, Lisa, I have got a quick slide there if we want to take a quick screenshot or whatever. But yeah, the thing is, for us, Lisa, there's absolutely no pressure from us. It's really good for us to be able to support people to do this, and ultimately for us, it's really interesting as well. It really is interesting to understand everybody's kind of backgrounds and everybody's kind of thought process of why they're getting involved in this and what they're doing. And for us, we're based in Staffordshire, in the heart of the country, but we're not tied geographically, certainly during COVID-19 times when we've got the lovely Zoom. So,
absolutely. Do you want to exit that for us? Is that right? Thank you. I was trying to do it for you, but it wasn't working. That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much for giving up your bank holiday Monday evening to talk to us all and to answer people's questions. And thank you everyone who's been watching at home. I'm sure the guys are in the group as well. So if you've got questions going forward, you can also approach them that way. So thank you.